So we see the diversity here. Now we have to understand the diversity of religious practices in the ancient Near East, in antiquity. And usually we can classify them into 3 distinct levels for analysis. You have to look at it at the individual level, and then the family level, or you can say the third one, the clan level. So the individual level, how they worshipped, the family level, how the Jews would worship their deity, and then the clan level, how the bigger, the extended family that Mr. Jew and Madam Alita come from, how they worship. So this is what we would have to look at to see how these 3 levels of analysis, how the deities or their deities is worshipped, or how they relate to their deities. So at the individual level, all 3, family, and the clan level, deities such as divine protectors, personal guards, and deified ancestors were sought. This is how all 3 levels would worship. They all had divine protectors. They all had personal deities per family. They had deified ancestors by the clans. Now, in all 3 contexts, individual, family, clan, there was no need for a physical sanctuary or a temple. It was the father of the family who would typically perform rituals that are needed. So you did not need a priest. You did not need a Levite. The head of household, the father of the family, would be the one who would perform any rituals to the deities that it's in their family or is in their clan. Anything that the deity requires will be performed by the father of the family.
Rabbi, question.
Mr. Drew.
Do you remember in Job, right? Job would go and make whatever he was doing, to the deity. Whatever deity he believed in at that time, according to Job, he would make for his family, because when his offerings, because his children would having a feast, you know what I'm saying,
Yes.
at the older brother's house, and he would go in there, and he said, in case, God forbid, if one of the children had done anything wrong, that they would be protected. Is this the same thing, what you're talking about?
The same thing, yeah, correct. So he's the head of the family because he was wealthy too. He had all these people under him, So yes, that is exactly what Job is doing. He did not need a priest to do that. He's doing that himself. Now things began to change. Now you have clans collaborating, coming together. So for example, like I said, Israel is formed by a group of clans that come together to unite around the deity YHVH. That is how Israel is formed. Okay. So that's a very good example here. So as several clans start to collaborate, religious activities on a local level began to take shape, with less established sanctuaries often found outdoors. You still didn't have the temples. A group of clans come together to live as one or to form, let's say, a state, whatever it is. Now you have religious activities now on a local level, and it takes shapes without temples. These are less established sanctuaries, often found outdoors, what the Bible will call in the open. This is what the biblical text refers to as cults, and it spoke greatly against it. That is the Deuteronomistic authors in play. For example, you come to 1 Kings 14 and we read, and they too built for themselves high places, monuments, and trees for idol worship, and every high hill and under every green tree. So when the clans are now coming together with other clans, this is how now the worship on a local level it's going on. It's in the open, it's under trees, and there is nothing wrong with it. It's the Deuteronomistic writer that is trying to push monotheism, who has pushed monotheism and centralized worship to Jerusalem, who has an issue with what's going on and is writing against it. So now you have the clans coming together, and now the worship is now it's on a local level. Okay, when the clans come together now what happens is that they would have to get a king. They'll have to get one leader who would rule over them or will be the go-to person. So now we see the worship come to what we would call a national scale. And with that, on a national scale, cult ceremonies centered around the national deity, as well as associated deities. And it was organized by having a mediator, which was not a priest, but rather the king. So instead of the head of family doing it, now you have the king doing it on a national level. Any questions, contributions, comments on these three levels and how it evolved, and how when it gets on a national level, now the king is the one who is usually the mediator?
When we say national level, we're referring back to when the South get control of it, right? Or we're still referring it, or we're still looking at it from a northern perspective.
Um, from an Asian Near Eastern perspective, but we're using the North as an example. So
Oh, okay,
let
okay.
me explain further. Let's go back to when we have Labayu, Shechem, with the city states, and Labayu is trying to bring them all together. So let's say Labayu is able to bring three other city states together. Now they've left the clan level and they've come to the national level. At the national level, they're going to pick a king. But what is going to bring them all together in unity? They're going to swear allegiance, but it's going to be sworn to a particular deity who becomes the patron deity of these three groups. They choose, okay, we're going to rally around YHVH. So now YHVH is the national deity, even though the territories have their associated deities, their own local deities. And then the person who will become the mediator is the king.
Okay, okay. So this basic model is universal across the ancient Near East, though. This is just, you're just using us as the North as an example.
Correct. And the reason why I'm
Okay.
using the North is because this is actually what happened in the North for the entity Israel to be formed.
Okay, okay. All right, I see it now. I see it.
And we'll notice that when the entity is formed, some clans were initially not part of it. We'll look at that as well. or some tribes were initially not part of it. Okay, now let's look at the clan level. Let's focus on the third level. It is argued in scholarship that the official royal court in Israel and Judah differed greatly. Remember, Judah is not part of Israel. Judah has its own territories, its own clans that would come together and rally around a deity. The north also would have its a bunch of clans who will come together, rally behind a deity. Though they may have chosen Yud He Vav He, both territories, as a deity, maybe a national one, there were differences in how they worshipped this deity. When we come to the north, Yud He Vav He was seen as a god of storms and fertility, similar to Baal. We're looking from 930 BCE to 722 BCE when it was destroyed. This is how the north worshipped or saw Yud He Vav He as a god of storms and fertility, similar to Baal. In the south, Yud He Vav He adopted traits from the old sun god, Shalim, which was mainly connected to Jerusalem. This god, this Jebusite deity, connected to Jerusalem, Yud He Vav He, when he entered into Jerusalem, adopted the traits of this old sun god. I think I've mentioned this before, but let me just remind you. The name Jerusalem existed before the biblical text wrote Jerusalem in the text and made it a city of peace. Yeru, Shalom, Salem, peace. But in the time of the Jebusites, or in the time of the petty kings, we have evidence from Egypt, a letter going to Jerusalem, which would be the foundation of this deity Shalem. That is why when we talked about Solomon, David's kids, their names, I said Shlomo is named after this deity, Shalem. So again, when the deity entered into the north, Yud He Vav He was seen as a god of storms and fertility, similar to Baal. But when Yud He Vav He entered Jerusalem, he adopted the traits of the old sun god, the god of the dusk, Shalem. So what we see, or what clearly we should see, is the differences in relative emphasis between practices in the north and in the south. If one is seeing Yud He Vav He like he would see Baal, and then the other one, Yud He Vav He, takes on traits of Shalem, of course, you're going to see some differences.